Good evening, everyone. Good morning to those of us who are joining us from distant lands. As Paul has said, my name is Lady Simelo, and I'm going to present to you the results of an online survey that we conducted among South African suburban users and growers of cannabis. So I'm coming to you from a company called Social Surveys Africa. And I'm just trying to get my screen up. There you go. And I'll basically be giving you the results of the study that we've been running. Now, before I jump into the survey results, I'd like to give a big thank you to Myrtle Clark and Fields of Green for All, who helped us to disseminate the questionnaire so wildly. I'd also like to thank Swisiswa Kaba and the ACA group, as well as Phil from Global Go, who both helped to sponsor this survey. I am a researcher and I work at a company called Social Surveys. And we've been running for the past 33 years, and we have experience in social research, research advocacy, and policy development. Now, from the moment that Judge Zondo gave his progressive ruling back in 2018, we've been trying to raise money to conduct a large, nationally representative and in-depth study in order to determine the scope of the cannabis sector in South Africa. A study of this nature will form a critical evidence base for the development of a responsible and enabling cannabis policy. Now, the proposed cannabis bill that came out from the Justice Department earlier this year is clear proof that there is a dire need for relevant information, proper engagement, and public consultation if South Africa wants to develop any kind of a progressive cannabis economy and policy. The survey in itself is not representative of the whole country. Now, we achieved a sample of 2,043 suburban users and growers of cannabis. The sample is predominantly urban metro, and because of the online nature of the methodology, more than half of the respondents are middle class. Now, with this sample, we're able to gain some critical insight into the incredible potential that the sector represents, both in terms of potential job creation and also in terms of tax revenue and potential stimulus to the economy. We were unable to reach a critical constituency in the Rastafari community with indigenous farmers, traditional healers, and other local communities of practice. And they are critical in order for us to develop a local industry and a local market for cannabis in South Africa, and for us to also get a critical understanding of the players on the ground. Now, this is why it is so very important that we have a nationally representative survey that we can run in order for us to reach everyone and to help shape a cannabis policy that is representative and national. With the sample that we ran, we got a very good, healthy number, 2,043. Now, many of the people who responded were from the Gauteng region, with a fairly good distribution coming in from the Western Cape, KZN, and the Eastern Cape. Now, when we look at race, the majority of the people who responded, 63% were white, 12% black, 10% colored, and 5% Asian. And it's interesting to note also that with the age range in the respondents that we got, in the age range, 33% were between the ages of 30 and 39, 22% between 18 and 25, which wasn't a big surprise there. 18% between 40 and 49, and 11% between 50 and 79. So this sort of dispels the myth of cannabis users being some kind of drugged out young hippie types. Now, in terms of their personal income, it is considerably higher than the national average, with 55% of our respondents earning 12,000 rands and above. So that was an interesting thing for us to note. Now, the myths around cannabis are that we're a bunch of drug addicts and a bunch of dropouts. But when you look at our personal income, almost 26% are earning 12,000 and above per month, 12,000 to 24,000. Only 7% of our entire sample is unemployed. And that is actually quite impressive when you look at the fact that we have close to 50% unemployment rate in South Africa. Now, 81% of our sample use cannabis on a daily basis, and 77% of the users in this sample started using in the past 5 years. Now, this is in line, I think, with international sort of trends in terms of cannabis use, and it might also have something to do with the Judge Zondo ruling. We don't know. Oh, and the average amount that is spent on cannabis per year in South Africa comes close to 50 million rand, because the average spent per month is 1,944 rand per user. This is very interesting to note, because then it tells us that there is actually a great potential for tax revenue if cannabis was legalized in South Africa. Many of the people that use cannabis use it specifically within the sample that we have, use it specifically for medicinal purposes, with 63% using it. Now, 94% of those who use cannabis for medicinal purposes would strongly recommend it to others to use. The majority of the ailments that they are treating with cannabis is inability to sleep, anxiety, and depression, followed closely by general pain and a whole list of other ailments. So we do have a vibrant sort of culture already in South Africa of people, and an established market within the middle class for cannabis products when it comes to medicinal cannabis. Now, in terms of growing cannabis, 71% of the sample that we drew grow their own cannabis, which is very interesting. I found this to be surprising because there's also a direct correlation between the socioeconomic status of the respondents and the number of plants that they grow. And this would probably have something to do with access to land, access to equipment, access to all the other paraphernalia that grow with being able to grow your own plants. Now, on average, those that earn 12,000 Rand and above grow about 309 plants, whereas those that grow between 1 Rand and 12,000 Rand grow on average about 46 plants each. Now, on average, 1 in 5 of the growers that we interviewed in the survey earn more than a quarter of their income from cannabis. So that was also interesting to note. And it's particularly an important finding in that it demonstrates the opportunity for us to have equitable access to land as a prerequisite and a very important thing in terms of how we view policy around cannabis in South Africa. We don't want to find ourselves replicating another unequal economy in South Africa with cannabis, where the majority of the people who use it, who want to use it, are not able to, which is what we are finding at the moment with the cannabis bill that seems to be very racist in nature and very classist in that it leaves out a lot of people. The potential jobs that legalizing cannabis would increase 30-fold in South Africa, because we found that on average, every grower employed about 3 people, which accounted for 4,351 jobs. And this was just from the sample of 2,043 people alone. So if cannabis was fully legalized, the number of jobs that would create is actually, it's immeasurable. we've come up to 44,950 just based on the 2043. Now, if we are able to run a study that is looking at the entire nation as a whole, we are going to find much better figures than this. In terms of our study, the majority of the people are growing their plants outdoors, with 83% growing outdoor, 49% growing indoor, and 22% growing either in a greenhouse or in a tunnel. Half of the sample indicated that they either sell, consult, or invest in the cannabis industry. 12% of them were consulting, 12% investing, and a full 34% were selling. Now, when asked how much they would invest if cannabis was legalized, the average investment was around 4,642,813. And this was if cannabis was legalized. And this number came from only about 549 of the respondents that we spoke to. That is a large number. 80% of the sample indicate that they would invest in cultivation, 37% in delivery of service, 46% in retail and manufacturing. Now, this obviously represents a huge opportunity for the country, and it indicates that we have got a very good appetite for investment in South Africa. 15% of this sample, unfortunately, because of the draconian laws that we have been arrested for cannabis. The majority were arrested for dealing, even though within the survey, the majority also indicated that they were growing purely for personal use. Now, on average, most of those who had been arrested twice and had suffered some form of police brutality, corruption, or theft of their possessions. And obviously the effect of being arrested for cannabis or anything at all is that you will have emotional distress. It has caused many to lose their jobs. They were disqualified from certain opportunities, or they've had their visas declined and are now unable to travel. The cannabis bill that was proposed has within its propositions a lot of limiting of the number of plants that can be grown. And there's strong resistance from the sample that we drew to this limiting of plants. Now, the biggest worry amongst our sample was that police would be invading their privacy on a regular basis just to count plants. And this goes directly against the whole point of private use. The other fear is that regulators don't understand how much cannabis a single person needs if they are a regular cannabis user, that regulators don't understand the different strains that can be different in size as well, and that they wouldn't even know the difference between a CBD strain and a THC strain, and there's just going to be a lot of confusion, legal confusion. And this will cause a lot of police intimidation and harassment, much more than there has ever been before. Cannabis is already being used to effectively treat a wide range of ailments across all age groups, and it's likely to grow with formalization and education. There's a large gap in the local cannabis community, and there's also a large gap about the potential local market. Now, public consultation is critical. There's also a strong resistance to limiting the number of plants that can be grown, and this is viewed as going against the very spirit of Judge Zondo's ruling to protect people's right to privacy. There's a strong, vibrant middle class cannabis sector, and this middle class cannabis sector is likely to invest heavily if cannabis is legalized. Employment in the sector could increase 30-fold if regulation is enabling. And the investment potential for cannabis from within this country is substantial. So this shows us that If we are able to conduct a nationally representative study, we can actually help government and help ourselves to build a very strong cannabis economy in South Africa. But in order for us to do this nationally representative study, we need your support as social surveys. Funding is required. Unfortunately, without your support, we won't be able to do it. It won't be possible. So we request that you generally support this critical initiative, because your support will help to ensure that our policies benefit everyone, particularly the man on the ground, because it's very, very critical and important for us to build a local market, a local economy for cannabis in this country. Anything else will just, I don't know, will be wasting a valuable resource that we have. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you all about our findings. And like we say at Social Surveys, knowledge is power, but every